What if I told you that the decisions shaping your life, your rent, your job, your climate, your future, are being made by a group of people who will never have to live with the consequences? I'm not talking about a conspiracy. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat. I'm talking about something hiding in a plain sight. Australia is being run by the old. And mate, they are not letting go. Before you click away thinking this is some boring political lecture, stick with me, because this affects you directly. Your rent, your wages, your shot at owning a home, your planet. The word is gerontocracy, from the Greek, geron, meaning old man, kratos, meaning power, rule by the elderly. Now I want to be clear right from the start, this is not about hating old people. Your nan is probably a legend. This is about a system, a structure, where power is concentrated in the hands of people who are so far removed from your daily reality, they might as well be living on another planet. Here's a fact that should stop you cold. The average Australian is 38 years old. The average federal member of parliament is 51 years old, and that is actually a good year. In recent parliaments, it has been even older. The median age in Australia's parliament has been above 50 for decades, and the people at the very top of that system, even older. Think about what that really means. The people writing the rules about housing affordability own an average of 2 investment properties each. The people deciding climate policy have, statistically, 15 to 20 years left on this earth. The people setting wages policy haven't worked a regular job since the 1990s. And here's the thing that absolutely breaks my brain. We keep voting them in. But is that actually our fault? Or is the game rigged so that they stay in power no matter what? Let's talk about it. Let me introduce you to the real power structure of Australia in 2026, because I think a lot of young Australians don't actually know who is calling the shots, and that is exactly how they want it. Let's start with the money, because money is power. Gina Reinhardt, age 72, net worth, depending on iron ore prices, somewhere between $33 and $41 billion. She has topped Australia's rich list 6 years in a row. She is the executive chairman of Hancock Prospecting, and she has spent her entire life making sure governments do what is good for mining. She has donated to conservative political causes. She has bought into media companies. She has lobbied against climate action, against mining taxes, against anything that might slow the accumulation of her extraordinary wealth. Now, she's not doing anything illegal, she's playing the game that exists. But here is the real question. Who designed that game, and who does it serve? Harry Triguboff, age 91. Net worth, $34 billion, known as High Rise Harry. He built his entire fortune on apartment developments across Australia. He is literally one of the primary architects of the housing market that is crushing young Australians today. Sydney's median house price is now $1.75 million. That is 13.8 times the average household income. And High Rise Harry just keeps building luxury apartments while young Australians are squeezed into share houses well into their 30s and 40s. Andrew Forrest, age 63, $27 billion. Mining, enormous influence in Western Australian politics and national energy policy. Clive Palmer, age 71, $20 billion. The man who has spent more on political advertising than any individual in Australian history, not to win government himself, but to direct votes and block policies he personally doesn't like. He reportedly spent over $100 million on political campaigns. Think about that. One man, $100 million. Shaping the political choices of an entire nation. And then there is the media. Kerry Stokes, 84 years old, controlling 7 West Media, one of the biggest news networks in the country. The stories you see, the stories you don't see, the politicians who get soft interviews and the ones who get destroyed. Kerry Stokes helps decide all of that. And Rupert Murdoch, who controls News Corp Australia, which owns The Australian, The Herald Sun, The Daily Telegraph, and dozens of other newspapers, is 95 years old. 95. And his newspapers still set the political agenda in this country every single morning. News Corp controls over 70% of Australia's metropolitan newspaper circulation. So stop and think about that ecosystem for a second. An elderly billionaire mining class funds conservative politics. An elderly media class decides what stories get told. And elderly politicians in Parliament pass the laws. And you, a 24-year-old paying 60% of your income in rent, you get to vote once every 3 years. How is that working out for you? Let's go inside. The 48th Parliament commenced in July 2025, and the numbers are genuinely shocking. Only one person in the entire Senate is under 25 years old. One person. In a chamber with over 100 senators, the youngest member of the House of Representatives, the so-called baby of the House, is in their late 20s. In a chamber of 151 members. Internationally, just 1.65% of parliamentarians worldwide are in their 20s. In Australia, we are roughly in line with that, which means we are normal by a broken global standard. Here is what gets me though. It is not just about age, it is about experience. Or rather, what kind of experience? The typical Australian federal politician is a 51-year-old who went to university, worked in politics or law or business, and owns at least 2 properties. They have never lived paycheck to paycheck as an adult. They have never been on a waiting list for mental health services. They have never had to choose between groceries and rent. And yet, these are the people designing the systems that govern exactly those situations for millions of Australians every single day. They are making housing policy while sitting on investment properties that benefit from negative gearing, a tax concession that costs Australia almost $22 billion a year in lost government revenue. And who gets 59% of that benefit? The top 1% of earners. Meanwhile, young Australians are now spending on average 50% of household income on mortgage repayments if they manage to get into the market at all. 50%. The official threshold for housing stress is 30%. Young Australians are living at 50. This is not an accident. These are deliberate policy choices made by people who directly benefit from leaving things exactly as they are. And that is not a conspiracy theory. That is just math. Let me hit you with some numbers that I genuinely think about at 3 in the morning. Australia has over 130 billionaires. The average wealth of those billionaires? $3.6 billion each. And last year their wealth grew by an average of $395 million per person. At the same time, 3.7 million Australians live in poverty, including 757,000 children under the age of 15. 1 in 3 Australian households experienced food insecurity last year. Let that sink in. This is not a poor country. This is one of the wealthiest countries on earth, with a catastrophically unequal distribution of that wealth, and a political system that is dominated by the people sitting at the very top of that distribution. The top 10% of Australian households hold 46% of all wealth in this country. 2/3 of the increase in household wealth in recent years has come from house price inflation, not work, not innovation, not productivity, just owning land and watching it go up. Home values surged 47% since March 2020, 47%. For those who already owned property, the last 5 years were like winning the lottery without buying a ticket. For those who didn't, every single one of those gains was directly felt as loss. Every time a house went up $100,000, that was another $100,000 that renters had to somehow save for a deposit that was already completely out of reach. Intergenerational wealth is now the dividing line. If your parents own a home, you can probably get into the market with their help. Without that support, many young Australians face a lifetime of renting. The bank of mum and dad has effectively become one of Australia's largest mortgage lenders. Think about what that means. We've created a system where your life outcomes are substantially determined not by your work ethic, not by your intelligence, not by how hard you grind, but by whether your parents happen to buy property in the right suburb in the right decade. That is not a meritocracy. That is an aristocracy with extra steps, and the people with the political power to fix it, they are the ones benefiting most from leaving it exactly as it is. And then there is climate change, the ultimate test of gerontocracy, the most revealing one. Because here is the fundamental problem. The decisions being made right now about fossil fuels, about emissions, about the Great Barrier Reef, about land clearing, those decisions will play out over the next 50 to 100 years. The people making those decisions, many of them will not be alive in 50 years. Research has shown that gerontocratic political systems are demonstrably less likely to take urgent action on climate change, because the people in power face a completely different time horizon than the people who will actually live with the consequences. Gina Rinehart has tens of billions invested in iron ore and fossil fuels. She is 72. By the time the worst climate impacts hit this country, the extreme heat events, the coastal flooding, the agricultural collapse, she will not be here, but you will. Harry Triguboff built his fortune on high-density urban development. He is 91. The apartments he built will be standing and heating up, long after he is gone. Australia approved new coal and gas projects while the Great Barrier Reef experienced its worst mass bleaching events ever recorded. We are one of the highest per capita carbon emitters in the entire developed world, and the fossil fuel lobby, funded by some of the same elderly billionaires we have been talking about, has spent decades making sure climate policy in this country stays weak, delayed, and full of loopholes. Young Australians are the ones who will live with coral bleaching, with more powerful cyclones, with rising seas threatening our coastal cities, with summers that are genuinely dangerous. But we are not the ones making the calls, and that has to change. Okay? So I don't want this to just be a rage video. I want this to actually matter. Because here is the thing, we are not powerless, not even close. There are 5.4 million Australians between the ages of 18 and 34. 5.4 million people. If every single one of us voted with our generation's actual interests in mind, housing affordability, climate action, intergenerational fairness, we would reshape this country overnight. We have the numbers. We just have not been using them. The problem is engagement. And this is where I need you to actually listen. Older Australians vote at significantly higher rates than younger Australians, and politicians know this. They design policy to serve the people who show up. It is simple math. If you do not show up, you do not exist to them. In the United States, where this conversation has exploded after a bombshell New York Times opinion piece called out American gerontocracy, young people aged 18 to 29 vote at 41%, people over 65 vote at 76%. Politicians can do that math in their sleep. They know exactly who they need to please. Australia has compulsory voting, which actually gives us a massive structural advantage that most countries in the world do not have. You have to vote, but you can still vote informally, you can still not enroll, you can still just mentally check out, and that is exactly what the old guard is counting on. Here is something genuinely wild to think about. Gina Reinhart gets one vote, just like you. $33 billion in the bank, and she still only gets one vote on election day. The reason she has so much political power is because she funds the people who win many votes. She's buying influence with the political class. The only way to break that is to make politicians more scared of us, the young majority, than they are of her checkbook. So here is exactly what I am asking you to do. 1. Enroll and vote. If you are not enrolled, do it today. Right now. Pause this video. Go to aec.gov.au. It takes 4 minutes. 4 minutes to put yourself back in the game. 2. Vote on issues, not on habit. Your parents might vote a certain way because their parents did. That is not a reason. Ask what each candidate actually stands for on housing affordability, on climate, on intergenerational equity. Ask if they own investment properties. Ask if they have taken donations from mining companies. That information is public and it tells you everything. 3. Run for something. I am completely serious. Local council, your union, your school board, your community association. The only way the age profile of power changes is if young people step into those spaces. Senator Charlotte Walker is 21 years old and is sitting in the Australian Senate right now. 21 years old, she is proof that it is possible. If she can do it, the door is open. 4. Make noise. Share this video. Talk about this stuff at the pub, at work, at family dinners, especially at family dinners, because that is exactly where this conversation needs to happen. Respectfully, calmly, but clearly. Because the older generation has no idea that the system that worked for them is actively working against their own kids and grandkids. The gerontocracy does not fall because old people retire. History shows us that does not happen fast enough. It changes when younger generations demand a seat at the table, when we make our voices too loud to ignore, when we stop being the generation that shrugs and says nothing ever changes. Australia is one of the wealthiest countries on earth. We have incredible natural resources, a highly educated population, and one of the most livable climates on the planet. For now. There is absolutely no reason why a 27-year-old working full-time in this country should be unable to afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment in any major city. No reason at all, except political choices, made deliberately, by people who do not share your reality and who have every financial incentive to keep things exactly as they are. So yeah, only in Australia do we have a country this rich, this lucky, this full of potential, and hand the keys to people who have been running things since before the internet existed. That has got to change, mate. And it starts with you. If this video made you think or made you angry, good. That is exactly the point. Drop a comment below, tell me what you reckon. Do you think Australia is a gerontocracy? Who do you think really runs this country? I read every single comment, and if you know a young person who has given up on politics, who says nothing ever changes, who thinks their vote does not matter, send them this video. Because that cynicism, that nothing ever changes energy, that is the most powerful weapon the old guard has against us. Do not give it to them for free. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. This has been Only in Australia, where the most unbelievable stuff is always, always true.